My brother stole my inheritance and moved abroad. I was broke until my quiet sister said, I fixed it. A week later, I received a call, and guess who that was? My ran-away brother. Hi. Thank you for your continuous support. This means a lot to us. If you enjoy the stories we share, kindly subscribe to this channel and comment on which city you are watching from. We might just give you a shout-out in our next story. Today, our special shout-out goes to Gregory Johnson from Ontario. We are glad you enjoy our stories. Now let's dive into the details of today's story. I can still smell the lilies, those cloying, white blooms Gran loved so much, mingling with the damp earth as we stood around her casket that gray October morning. The wind tugged at my coat, sharp and cold, like it wanted to peel me open and expose the ache I'd been carrying since she took her last breath. Gran was gone, and there we were, me, Liam, and Clara, three shadows under a sagging oak, pretending we weren't already fracturing. Gran's funeral wasn't grand, but it was hers. The little church smelled of old hymnals and wax, and the pews creaked under the weight of neighbors who'd known her apple pies better than her secrets. I stood there, hands shoved deep in my pockets, watching Liam work the crowd. He was all smiles and easy charm, his dark hair slicked back, his voice smooth as whiskey as he clapped shoulders and promised to keep Gran's memory alive. That's Liam for you. Always the golden boy, the one who could talk his way out of a locked vault. And then there was Clara, hovering near the back, her pale hands clutching a worn copy of Gran's favorite poetry book. She didn't say much, just watched, her gray eyes catching everything, like a storm brewing behind a still sea. I don't know why I let Liam take the lead that day. Maybe it was the way he leaned in close after the service, his breath warm against the chill as he said, Hey, let me handle the estate stuff. You're swamped with work, and Clara's, well, Clara, I've got this. He flashed that grin, the one that had gotten him out of speeding tickets and bar tabs, and I caved. Gran left us $1.5 million, split 3 ways, a clean $500,000 each. It wasn't a fortune to some, but to us, it was a lifeline, a chance to pay off my crumbling apartment's mortgage, maybe even quit the soul-crushing call center job I'd been chained to. I hesitated, though, something in my gut twisted, a warning I couldn't name. But Liam clapped my shoulder, said, Trust me, kid. And I did. Clara just nodded, silent as always, her lips pressed into a thin line. 3 weeks later, I was sprawled on my couch, the one with the springs poking through, when my phone buzzed. A bank alert. I swiped it open, expecting some boring update, but the numbers hit me like a fist to the throat. Account balance, $0. My heart slammed against my ribs, a wild, frantic thudding that drowned out the TV's drone. I refreshed the app, once, twice, 3 times, watching those zeros mock me. $500,000 gone. My half. Our half. I scrambled to call Liam, fingers trembling so bad I dropped the phone twice. Straight to voicemail. His cheerful, Hey, it's Liam. Leave a message, taunted me, and I hurled the phone across the room. It cracked against the wall, but I didn't care. I was already tearing through my inbox, desperate for answers. There it was, buried under spam. An email from Liam, timestamped 2 days ago. No subject line, just a few cold lines that sliced me open. Hey kid. Took a chance to start fresh. Somewhere sunny. You'll be fine, always are. Take care. That was it. No apology, no explanation, just a casual gut punch from halfway across the world. I read it again, the words blurring as rage boiled up, hot and choking. Somewhere sunny. He'd taken everything. Our inheritance, Gran's legacy, and bolted. I pictured him lounging on some beach, sipping a drink with an umbrella, while I sat here with a leaking ceiling and a maxed-out credit card. I stumbled to the kitchen, my breaths ragged, and yanked open the fridge. Empty except for a half-dead jar of pickles. The irony hit me, I couldn't even afford to drown my fury in cheap beer. I slammed the door so hard it rattled, then sank to the floor, fist clenched against the peeling linoleum. That's when Clara walked in. She'd been staying over, crashing on my lumpy spare mattress since Gran's place sold. Her footsteps were soft, barely a whisper, but I felt her presence like a shadow stretching across the room. Liam's gone, I croaked, not looking up. He took it all. Every damn cent. My voice cracked, splintering under the weight of it. I expected her to gasp. Maybe cry she'd lost her share too, after all, but she just stood there, silent. I dragged my eyes up to her, and there she was, small, pale, her mousy hair pulled back tight, those gray eyes locked on me. Not shocked, not even angry, just steady, like she'd seen this coming from a mile away. How? She asked, her voice low, almost lost in the hum of the fridge. I shoved the phone at her, the cracked screen glowing with Liam's email. She read it, her face unreadable, then handed it back. He's an idiot, she said, matter of fact, like she was commenting on the weather. I barked a laugh, bitter and jagged. An idiot with our money, Clara. What the hell do we do? Call the cops? Fly to wherever he is and drag him back. My words tumbled out, fast and furious, a storm I couldn't rein in. I'm broke. You're broke. He's sipping my ties, and we're screwed. She didn't flinch. Didn't match my panic. She just crossed her arms, tilting her head like she was sizing me up, or maybe sizing up Liam's mess. The kitchen light flickered overhead, casting her in a harsh glow, and for a split second, I swore I saw something flicker in her eyes too. Not fear. Not despair. Something sharper, colder, like a blade catching the sun. I kept ranting, pacing now, my boots scuffing the floor. He's always been like this, hasn't he? Taking what he wants, leaving us to clean it up. Remember when he borrowed Dad's truck and totaled it? Or when he sweet-talked Gran into funding that stupid startup that tanked? And now this. My voice rose, echoing off the bare walls, but Clara didn't interrupt. She just listened, her silence heavier than my shouting. Finally, I stopped, chest heaving, and glared at her. Say something, damn it. She took a step closer, her sneakers squeaking faintly, and leaned in just enough that I could smell the lavender shampoo she always used, a faint tether to calm in the chaos. I'll fix it, she whispered. 3 little words, soft as a breath, but they landed like a thunderclap. Before I could snap back, fix it? How? She turned and slipped out of the kitchen, her footsteps fading down the hall. The door to the spare room clicked shut, leaving me alone with the buzzing fridge and a gnawing, electric unease. What did she mean, fix it? Clara, quiet Clara, who barely raised her voice above a murmur, what could she do against Liam's betrayal? I didn't know then, but something in her tone, that steely edge beneath the softness, lodged itself in my gut. A promise. A threat. And as I sat there, staring at the cracked phone screen, I couldn't shake the feeling that the game had just begun. The days after Liam bolted with our inheritance didn't just crawl by, they clawed at me, relentless and sharp. I'd wake to the buzz of my phone, not with hope, but dread, another debt collector, their voices slick with fake patience, demanding payments I couldn't make. Mister, your last name, you're 3 months behind on the mortgage, they'd purr, while I gripped the receiver till my knuckles whitened, staring at the water stain creeping across my ceiling like a slow-moving bruise. I'd mutter promises I couldn't keep next week, I swear. Then hang up and drag myself to the call center, where I spent 8 hours a day getting screamed at by strangers over late cable bills. The irony wasn't lost on me. I was broke, chasing other people's debts while mine piled up like a house of cards in a windstorm. At night, I'd collapse onto that sagging couch, the springs digging into my spine, and doomscroll Liam's Instagram. There he was, smug as ever, posting selfies on some blinding white beach, turquoise waves lapping at his feet, a cocktail in hand, that damn grin flashing like he hadn't a care in the world. Living my best life, the caption read, and I'd feel the rage bubble up, hot and choking, until I'd hurl my phone across the room just to stop seeing it. $500,000, my $500,000, funding his tan and his smug little paradise. I pictured him laughing at me, toasting to my misery, and it took everything not to smash something. The cracked screen on my phone was proof I'd already lost that fight once. Clara was still crashing at my place, her quiet presence a constant hum in the background. She'd shuffle into the kitchen each morning, her sneakers whispering against the floor, and brew coffee in silence while I ranted about Liam. I expected her to join me, to curse him out, maybe cry over her own lost share. But she didn't. She'd just sit there, perched on a wobbly stool, cradling her mug, those gray eyes tracking me like I was a puzzle she was piecing together. It drove me nuts. He's out there flaunting it, Clara. I'd snap, pacing the tiny kitchen, the linoleum sticky under my boots. Look at this, another damn selfie. He's got no shame, none. I'd shove my phone at her, the screen glowing with Liam's latest post, a sunset, him silhouetted like some hero in a cheap movie. She'd glance at it, then back at me, calm as a still pond. He's always been like this, she'd say, her voice soft but steady, like she was stating a fact carved in stone. And she was right. I knew it, even if I didn't want to hear it. Liam's betrayals weren't new. They were just bigger now, sharper. I drift back sometimes, the memories hitting like static jolts. Him at 16, borrowing $20 from my piggy bank for a date, swearing he'd pay me back, never did. Or at 22, when he sweet-talked Dad into lending him the truck for a quick job, only to crash it into a ditch and shrug it off with a laugh. He'd always had that charm, a silver tongue that turned his messes into someone else's problem. And me? I'd always been the sucker who believed him. Clara, though, she'd never bought it. I remembered her as a kid, sitting cross-legged on Grant's porch, watching Liam spin his tails with that quiet, unblinking stare. She'd never confront him, never call him out, just watched, like she was filing it all away. Back then, I thought she was shy, maybe scared of him. Now, sitting across from her in my crumbling apartment, I wasn't so sure. She'd changed since Grant's funeral, or maybe I just started noticing. She had this notebook now, a battered little thing with a faded blue cover, and she'd scribble in it when she thought I wasn't looking. I'd catch her at odd hours, middle of the night, hunched over the kitchen table, the scratch of her pen like a secret code I couldn't crack. What's that? I'd asked once, leaning over her shoulder. She'd snapped it shut, quick as a trap, and muttered, just notes, before slipping away. That night, I hit my breaking point. The debt collectors had called twice, one threatening to repossess my car, the other hinting at lawsuits, and Liam's latest post was a video, him laughing, waves crashing, some woman's voice cooing in the background. I stormed into the kitchen where Clara sat, notebook open, pen poised. He's living it up while we're drowning. I roared, slamming my phone down so hard the table wobbled. $500,000, Clara, gone. I can't pay my bills, I can't eat, and he's out there screwing us over. What are we supposed to do? My voice cracked, raw and ragged, and I hated how desperate I sounded, but I couldn't stop. We've got nothing, no money, no plan, nothing. She didn't flinch, didn't even look up right away. She just finished whatever she was writing, the pen scratch slicing through my tirade, then closed the notebook with a soft thud. When she finally met my eyes, there was no pity there, just that steady, unnerving calm. I'll look into it, she said, her voice low, deliberate, like she'd already decided something I hadn't caught up to yet. I blinked, thrown off. Look into it, I echoed, half laughing, half snarling. What's that supposed to mean? You gonna call him and ask nicely? Track him down with your poetry book? I was being cruel, I knew it, but the frustration clawed at me, and she was the only target in range. She didn't bite back, just stood, tucking the notebook under her arm, and headed for the hall. Give me some time, she said over her shoulder, and then she was gone, the spare room door clicking shut behind her. I stood there, chest heaving, the silence ringing in my ears louder than my shouting. Time. What good was time when Liam was sipping cocktails and I was one missed payment from losing everything? I kicked the table leg, pain shooting up my foot, and cursed under my breath. Clara didn't get it. Or maybe she did, and I was too blind to see how. It was hours later, past midnight, the apartment dark except for the flicker of a street light through the blinds, when I heard it. I'd been tossing on the couch, sleep dodging me, when a sound pulled me upright. Clara's voice, low and urgent, drifting from the spare room. I crept closer, socks silent on the floor, and pressed my ear to the door. No, faster, she snapped, her tone razor-sharp, nothing like the soft-spoken sister I knew. I need it by tomorrow. Dig deeper, everything you can find. A pause, then, good. Don't call back unless it's done. The line went dead. I heard the faint beep of her hanging up, and my pulse kicked into overdrive, a wild thudding that drowned out the night. I stumbled back, heart racing, questions clawing at me. Who was she talking to? What was she digging for? And why did she sound like someone I didn't recognize? I stared at that closed door, the sliver of light under it glowing like a warning, and felt the ground shift beneath me. Clara wasn't just looking into it. She was doing something. Something big. And I had no idea what. A week had crawled by since Clara's cryptic promise, 7 days of dodging debt collectors, choking down instant noodles, and staring at that cracked phone screen, waiting for something, anything, to shift. I'd given up hope of sleep, sprawled on the couch in the dim glow of a flickering lamp, when the call came. The ring sliced through the silence of my apartment like a knife, sharp and insistent, jolting me upright. My heart kicked hard against my ribs. No one called at 2 a.m. unless it was bad. I fumbled for the phone, the cracked glass biting into my palm, and saw the name flashing, Liam. My breath caught, a mix of fury and confusion tangling in my throat. After weeks of nothing, now he calls? I swiped to answer, my voice rasping out before I could stop it. What the hell do you want? Silence on the other end, just a faint crackle, like wind whipping through a bad connection. Then his voice, low and shaky, nothing like the cocky Liam I knew. It's me. I need to come home. The words stumbled out, jagged and desperate, and I froze, gripping the phone tighter. Come home. I spat, venom lacing every syllable. You stole everything, you bastard, $500,000, and now you want to crawl back? Where are you? My pulse hammered, a wild thudding that drowned out the hum of the fridge behind me. He didn't answer, not really. I've lost it, he muttered, his voice trembling like a leaf in a storm. Everything's gone. They're after me, I can't. A muffled thud cut him off, like something heavy hitting the ground, and I pictured him pacing some dingy room, sweat beading on that smug face I'd seen in his selfies. Who's after you? I demanded, leaning forward, the couch springs groaning under me. What did you do? But he just kept mumbling, half-coherent, people, debts, no way out until his voice cracked. Help me get back. Please. Before I could rip into him, the line went dead, a sharp click echoing in my ear like a gunshot. I sat there, staring at the phone, my breath coming in short, ragged bursts. Liam? Begging? The golden boy who danced off with our inheritance, now sounding like a cornered animal? It didn't add up. I flung the blanket off, my bare feet hitting the cold floor, and grabbed my laptop from the coffee table, its chipped edge scraping my knee as I yanked it open. I needed proof, something to make sense of this. I pulled up his Instagram, expecting more beach brags, but the page wouldn't load. Account not found. Twitter, same thing gone. Facebook, a blank wall. His digital footprint, that shiny parade of arrogance, had vanished overnight. My stomach twisted, a cold, electric jolt racing up my spine. What the hell was happening? The apartment was dead quiet except for the faint drip of that damn leak in the ceiling, plink, 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 and it gnawed at me as I paced, replaying his voice in my head. Lost everything. They're after me. Had he blown it all already? Gambled it away? Or was this some new con, a sob story to worm his way back? I didn't know, but the unease clung to me like damp air, thick and suffocating. I stopped mid-step. I was darting to the spare room door. Clara. She'd said she'd fix it, and now Liam was falling apart. Coincidence? My gut screamed no. I didn't knock, just pushed the door open, the hinges creaking like a warning. She was there, sitting cross-legged on the mattress, that battered blue notebook splayed open on her lap, a cheap desk lamp casting harsh shadows across her face. She didn't jump, didn't even look surprised, just lifted her gaze, those gray eyes locking onto mine, steady and unreadable. You're up late, she said, her voice soft but edged, like silk over steel. I didn't waste time. Liam just called, I said, stepping inside, the floorboards groaning under me. He's freaked out, says he's lost everything, wants to come home. What did you do, Clara? She closed the notebook, slow and deliberate, the sound of it snapping shut ringing in the stillness. For a beat, she didn't answer, just watched me, her lips twitching into the faintest hint of a smile. Then she stood, barefoot, her shadow stretching long across the wall. I nudged things along, she said, casual as if she'd rearranged the furniture, not upended our brother's life. My jaw tightened, a mix of awe and dread coiling in my chest. Nudged how? I pressed, voice low, almost afraid of the answer. She tilted her head, studying me like she was deciding how much to spill. He didn't hide it as well as he thought, she said finally, stepping closer, the lavender scent of her shampoo cutting through the musty air. Those accounts he stashed the money in offshore, sloppy encryption. I found them. Took it back. My breath hitched, a sharp inhale I couldn't hide. Took it back. I echoed, my mind racing to catch up. You mean, our money? The inheritance. She nodded, once, sharp and precise. Yours and mine. It's where it belongs now. I staggered back, my hip bumping the doorframe, the wood digging into me. How? I croaked, the word barely making it out. Hacking? Clara? The sister who'd spent her teens buried in poetry books, not computers? But her eyes glinted, a spark of something fierce, and I realized I didn't know her, not really. Doesn't matter, she said, brushing past me to the kitchen, her tone clipped. It's done. I followed, dazed, my socks slipping on the floor as I trailed her. Wait, done? He sounded terrified. Clara, what else did you do? She paused at the counter, her back to me, and for a moment, I thought she wouldn't answer. Then she turned, leaning against the edge, arms crossed. He made enemies, she said, her voice dropping lower, a thread of warning woven through it. People he thought he could play. I just pointed them in his direction. The words landed like stones in deep water, rippling out, and I felt the air shift. Thicker, heavier. Enemies. I whispered, my mouth dry. What kind of enemies? But she just shrugged, a small, evasive roll of her shoulders, and reached for the kettle. The kind who don't like being cheated, she said, turning on the tap, the water hissing as it filled. I stared at her, my little sister, standing there in faded pajamas, calmly making tea while admitting she'd, what? Sicked some shadowy figures on Liam? My mind spun, torn between disbelief and a strange, creeping admiration. You're serious, I said, more to myself than her, my voice trembling. She glanced over her shoulder, her expression unreadable. You wanted it fixed, she said simply, and turned back to the stove, the kettle clanking as she set it down. I opened my mouth, to argue, to demand more, but she cut me off, reaching into her pocket and pulling out a folded paper. She slid it across the counter, her fingers brushing the chipped edge. Check your account, she said, her tone flat but loaded. I unfolded it, my hands shaking, and there it was, a bank statement, my name at the top. Balance, $600,000. My share, $500,000, plus an extra $100,000 I couldn't account for. My knees buckled, and I gripped the counter, the paper crinkling in my fist. What? How? I stammered, but she leaned in close, her voice a whisper that sent a chill down my spine. He's not done paying yet, she said, her eyes glinting like polished steel in the dim light. Then she stepped back, leaving me clutching that statement, my heart pounding a frantic rhythm against my ribs as the kettle began to whistle, shrill and ominous in the dark. The kettle's whistle had barely faded when I sank into a chair, the bank statement trembling in my hands like it might combust. $600,000. My share, plus a mysterious extra $100,000, staring back at me in crisp black ink. My head spun, a dizzy swirl of relief and disbelief, but beneath it, a sharper edge gnawed at me. Clara. My quiet, poetry-loving sister had done this. Hacked Liam's accounts, turned his paradise into a nightmare, and she barely blinked while confessing it. I watched her now, stirring sugar into her tea across the kitchen, the spoon clinking against the mug with a rhythm too calm for the storm she'd just unleashed. Who are you? I whispered, the words slipping out before I could stop them. She froze, mid-stir, her back to me, and for a heartbeat, the only sound was the drip of that cursed ceiling leak. Plink, plink, echoing in the stillness. Then she turned, slow and deliberate, her gray eyes catching the dim light like polished flint. What do you mean? She asked, but there was a flicker in her voice, a crack in that calm facade, and I seized it. Don't play dumb, I said, leaning forward, the chair creaking under me. You hacked offshore accounts. You sicked enemies on Liam. You've got $600,000 sitting in my bank like it's nothing. Clara, I don't even know how to change my Wi-Fi password. How the hell did you do this? She set the mug down, the clink sharp against the counter, and crossed her arms, studying me like she was deciding how much of her soul to bear. The air thickened, heavy with unspoken truths, and I felt my pulse quicken, a thudding drumbeat in my ears. I've been freelancing, she said finally, her voice low, steady, but laced with something fierce. Data analysis. For years. I blinked, thrown. Data analysis? I echoed, my tone sharp with disbelief. What, like spreadsheets? That doesn't explain this. I waved the statement, the paper rustling like dry leaves. She stepped closer, her sneakers silent on the linoleum, and leaned against the table, close enough that I could smell the lavender in her hair. "It's more than spreadsheets," she said, her gaze locking onto mine. "I started small, gig work, cleaning up databases for tech startups. But I got good, really good. Companies paid me to dig, find patterns, secrets, money trails. Over time, I built connections." She paused, letting that word hang, heavy and loaded. "People who know things. People who can do things." My mouth went dry, a cold prickle racing down my spine. "Hackers," I rasped, barely above a whisper. She didn't flinch, just nodded, once, sharp and certain. I leaned back, the chair groaning, my mind racing to catch up. Clara, my little sister, the one who'd spent summers curled up on Grand's couch with dog-eared books, had a secret life? A network of tech-savvy shadows at her fingertips? I flashed back, unbidden, to those quiet afternoons growing up. Liam strutting in, 15 and full of himself, bragging about conning kids out of their lunch money with fake raffle tickets. I'd laughed, half impressed, half annoyed, but Clara, she just sat there, watching from the porch steps, her small hands clutching a pencil as she sketched in that old notebook. I'd thought she was doodling flowers. Now I wondered, had she been taking notes even then? When Liam took the money, she went on, snapping me back to the present. I couldn't let it stand. Her voice hardened, a steel thread weaving through it. "He didn't just steal from us, he spit on Grand's memory. So I tracked him. His accounts weren't hard to find. Cocky idiot used the same passwords he's had since high school. I cracked them, rerouted the funds back to us." She tapped the statement in my hand, her nail clicking against the table. "That's your half, plus a little extra he'd skimmed from some side deals. Call it interest." My breath hitched, a jagged gasp I couldn't hide. "You hacked him," I said, seeping into my voice despite the unease coiling in my gut. "Just like that." She shrugged, a small, almost smug tilt of her shoulders. "He made it easy." But that wasn't enough. She straightened, her shadow stretching across the floor, and the air shifted, darker, heavier. He'd been playing games abroad, scamming some low-life loan shark out of a quick 50 grand. I found the guy's contact, dropped a tip, let him know where Liam was lounging. I stared at her, my heart slamming against my ribs. "You set him up," I said, the realization crashing over me like a wave. "Those enemies he's running from, that's your doing." She didn't deny it, just met my gaze, unflinching. "He needed to learn," she said, her voice low and fierce, like a vow carved in stone. "Not just to hurt, to stop. He's been taking from us our whole lives, and I'm done watching." The words jolted me, dragging me back again to a memory I'd buried deep. Liam, 19, borrowing Grand's savings for some get-rich-quick scheme, promising her a fortune. She'd smiled, patted his cheek, and let him have it, 5 grand, gone in a month when the business folded. I'd been furious, but Clara, she'd stood in the kitchen doorway, 13 and silent, her fists clenched so tight her knuckles whitened. I'd thought she was scared. Now I saw it, rage simmering, waiting. "You swore to protect us," I said, piecing it together, my voice trembling. "Back then, didn't you?" When he kept getting away with it. Her eyes softened, just for a second, a flicker of the Clara I thought I knew. "Someone had to," she said quietly. "Grand couldn't. You wouldn't. So I did." The weight of it hit me, years of her watching, planning, building this quiet arsenal while I stumbled through life, blind to her strength. Not revenge, not really, a lesson, carved out with precision and patience. I swallowed hard, torn between marveling at her and fearing what she'd become. The money was back, ours again, safe in my account. But Liam wasn't done, she'd said. And now he was coming home, desperate, running from shadows she'd unleashed. "He called last night," I said, my voice rough, "begging to come back. Said he's lost everything." She nodded, unsurprised, and sipped her tea, the steam curling around her face like a veil. "Good," she said simply. "Let him run. He'll get here soon enough." I opened my mouth to ask what next, to demand the rest of her plan, but my phone buzzed, cutting through the tension like a blade. I snatched it up, the cracked screen glowing in the dim kitchen, and my stomach dropped. A text from Liam, short and stark. "I'm landing tomorrow. Please help me." My hand shook, the words blurring as I read them again, and I looked up at Clara. She was already watching me, her expression unreadable, but her eyes glinted, sharp, knowing, like a predator sizing up its prey. Tomorrow, I whispered, the word tasting like ash. Clara set her mug down, the clink ringing in my ears, and said nothing. But that glint in her eyes told me everything. Liam was coming, and whatever she'd started, it wasn't over yet. I'd barely slept since Liam's text. I'm landing tomorrow. Please help me. The words looping in my head like a taunt, keeping me pacing the apartment all night. The lamp flickered, casting jagged shadows on the walls, and every creak of the floorboards jolted me, like I was waiting for a ghost to barge in. Clara didn't say much after I showed her the message, just sipped her tea, that steely glint in her eyes sharpening, and murmured, "Let him come." By the time the clock hit 3 p.m., I was a mess, hands clammy, stomach churning, standing by the window, watching the street below for any sign of him. When the cab finally screeched up, spitting him out onto the curb, I almost didn't recognize the wreck stumbling toward my door. Liam looked like he'd been chewed up and spit out by the world he'd run to. His hair, once slick and perfect, hung greasy and wild, plastered to his forehead. His shirt, some designer thing he'd probably bragged about, was wrinkled and stained, one sleeve torn at the cuff. He dragged a battered suitcase behind him, the wheels scraping the pavement, and his eyes darted everywhere, up at the windows, down the street, like a hunted animal. When he banged on my door, the sound rattled through the apartment, loud and frantic, and I froze, my boots rooted to the floor. Clara appeared beside me, silent as a shadow, her arms crossed. "Open it," she said, her voice low and steady, and I did, my hand trembling on the knob. He stumbled in, reeking of sweat and stale liquor, and dropped the suitcase with a thud that echoed off the bare walls. "Thank God," he rasped, his voice cracked and raw, nothing like the smooth talker I'd known. "You gotta help me, kid. I'm in deep, real deep." His eyes, bloodshot, wild, locked onto mine, pleading, and for a second, I felt that old tug, the big brother instinct to fix his mess. But then I remembered, the empty bank account, the smug selfies, the $500,000 he'd stolen. My jaw tightened, and I stepped back, letting the door slam shut behind him. "Help you," I said, my voice low, dangerous. "After what you did, you've got some nerve." He flinched, hands raised like he could ward off my anger, and launched into his sob story, words tumbling out fast and sloppy. "I didn't mean for it to go this way," he said, pacing now, his shoes scuffing the floor. "I was going to double the money, invest it, make us all rich. But it fell apart, and these guys, these people, they came after me. I owe them that. They trashed my place, took everything. I barely got out." His voice broke, and he sank onto the couch, burying his face in his hands. "I'm sorry, okay? I screwed up. Just, please, get me out of this." I stared at him, my fist clenching so tight my nails bit into my palms. The room felt smaller, the air thick with his desperation and my simmering rage. "You're sorry," I snapped, stepping closer, my shadow falling over him. "You left us with nothing, Liam. I've been dodging debt collectors while you played king on some beach. And now you crawl back, begging? What people? What did you do?" He didn't answer, just groaned, dragging his hands through his hair, and I caught a flicker of movement, Clara, leaning against the wall, watching him like a hawk circling prey. Her silence unnerved him more than my shouting. He glanced at her, then away, his leg bouncing like he couldn't sit still. "Clara, come on," he tried, forcing a weak grin, that old charm flickering. "You get it, right? Family sticks together. Tell him to help me." But she didn't budge. Her face was ice, cold, unyielding, and when she spoke, her voice cut through the room like a blade. "You don't get to call us family," she said, slow and deliberate. "Not after what you've done." Liam's grin faltered, his eyes narrowing as he clocked her tone. "What's that supposed to mean?" He shot back, sitting up straighter, a spark of defiance flaring. "You think you're better than me? Little Clara, always so quiet. Don't pretend you're some saint." I saw her stiffen, just a fraction, but she didn't rise to it. Instead, she reached into her jacket and pulled out a thick manila envelope, the kind that holds secrets too heavy to speak. She tossed it onto the coffee table with a soft thwack, and the air shifted, tighter, sharper, like a storm about to break. "What's this?" Liam asked, his voice wobbling, but he didn't touch it, just stared, like it might bite. I didn't move either. My breath caught in my chest as Clara leaned forward, her eyes locked on him. "Evidence," she said, her tone flat but lethal. Forged signatures, grands, on loans you took out in her name. A charity she loved, gutted because you siphoned their funds. Receipts, bank records, emails. You didn't just steal from us, Liam. You've been a parasite for years. The room tilted. I snatched the envelope, ripping it open, and papers spilled out, photocopies of Grant's shaky handwriting, twisted into lies, bank statements showing thousands funneled into Liam's accounts, an email from him to some shady contact, laughing about easy marks. My stomach lurched, while rising as I saw Grant's legacy, her kindness, her trust, turned into his piggy bank. You son of a... I started, lunging toward him, but Clara's hand on my arm stopped me, firm and cool. Liam's charm cracked wide open then. He leapt up, face twisting, all pretense gone. You little bitch, he snarled at Clara, spit flying, his finger jabbing the air. You set me up, digging through my life like some creep. This is betrayal. I'm your brother. His voice rose, shrill and jagged, but she didn't flinch, just stared him down, her calm a wall he couldn't breach. You betrayed us first, she said, each word a hammer strike. Grant's dead, and you robbed her blind. You don't get to play victim. He turned to me, wild-eyed, grasping. You're not buying this, right? She's lying, twisting it. I'll pay it back, I swear. But I saw it then. The truth in those papers, the years of his scams piling up, and the brother I'd idolized crumbled into a stranger. No, I said, my voice steady despite the ache in my chest. She's not lying. You are. His face fell, slack with shock, and he staggered back, realizing he was cornered, his charm useless against us both. Clara stepped closer, her presence towering despite her small frame, and picked up the envelope, holding it out to me. The papers crinkled in her grip, a weight I felt in my bones. Your call, she said, her voice quiet but firm, her eyes searching mine, not pleading, just waiting. Liam whimpered, sinking back onto the couch, a broken shell of the man who'd walked in, but I barely heard him. My hands closed around the folder, the edges biting into my palms, and the room spun with the choice she'd dropped in my lap, family, justice, or something in between. The folder Clara handed me felt like a live wire in my hands, hot, dangerous, buzzing with a choice I couldn't shake. I stood there in the kitchen, Liam crumpled on the couch, whimpering like a kicked dog, while Clara watched me, her gray eyes steady but expectant. The papers inside Grant's forged signatures, the charity's drained accounts, Liam's smug emails, burned against my fingertips, a weight heavier than the $500,000 he'd stolen. I wanted to hurl it at him, watch it scatter like shrapnel, but instead, I clutched it tighter, my breath shallow and ragged. What do we do with this? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper, afraid of her answer as much as his pleading. Clara didn't hesitate. Turn him in, she said, her tone flat, final, like she'd already run the numbers and found no other solution. I flinched, the words hitting like a slap. He's our brother, I shot back, hating how weak it sounded, how it trembled with the old loyalty I couldn't quite kill. Liam seized it, lunging forward, his hands grasping at air. Yeah, listen to that. Family, kid, don't do this to me. His voice cracked, desperate, but Clara's icy stare silenced him. He stopped being family when he stole from Gran, she said, her words a blade slicing through his begging. This isn't just about us. Look at what he's done. I did. I spread the papers across the table, the dim light catching Grant's shaky handwriting twisted into lies, loans she'd never signed, money she'd never spent. A letter from a charity worker, thanking her for a mentorship program she'd funded, now broke because Liam had siphoned it dry. My throat tightened, a lump I couldn't swallow, and I saw her Gran, smiling over her apple pies, trusting him with her savings, her love. He'd taken it all, and I'd let him. The guilt clawed at me, sharp and relentless, but so did the rage, hot, blinding, pushing me toward Clara's side. I didn't sleep that night. I sat on the couch, Liam snoring fitfully in the spare room under Clara's watchful eye, the folder open beside me. Every creak of the apartment, every plink of that damn leak, echoed the question, let him go, or end this. By dawn, my hands shook with exhaustion and resolve. I called the cops, voice steady despite the tremor in my gut, and watched as they hauled him out in cuffs, his yells of, "You're ruining me," fading down the stairwell. Clara stood by the window, arms crossed, her silence louder than his protests. The arrest cracked open a dam. Detectives dug into the evidence, Clara's meticulous gift, and found a web of fraud sprawling beyond our inheritance. Fake investments, rigged contracts, small businesses gutted by his charm. The trial hit like a circus crashing into town, and I sat in the courtroom, the wooden bench hard under me, the air thick with whispers and the stale smell of justice. Liam strutted in that first day, suit pressed, grinning like he could talk his way out, same old golden boy. But Clara's evidence was a guillotine, and the victims' testimonies were the blade. A charity worker took the stand. Mid-40s, glasses fogged with tears, her voice trembling as she spoke of Gran. She taught me how to balance books, how to believe in myself, she said, clutching a tissue. He stole that from us, left kids with nothing. I gripped the bench, nails digging into the wood, as Liam's smirk faltered. A small-time investor followed, a guy with calloused hands and a voice rough with anger, detailing how Liam's sure thing cost him his savings. One by one, they tore him apart, and I watched his arrogance crumble, shoulders slumping, eyes darting, that silver tongue tripping over lies even the judge sneered at. The gavel fell on day 5, 10 years, no parole. The courtroom buzzed, a chaotic hum of gasps and murmurs, and Liam turned to me, cuffs clanking, his face a mask of shock and fury. "You did this," he shouted, voice hoarse, as bailiffs dragged him away. "You and her, you'll pay." The threat hung there, hollow and desperate, swallowed by the slamming of the holding cell door. I sat frozen, relief flooding me, clean, sharp, like rain after a drought, but guilt trailed it, a bitter aftertaste I couldn't shake. He was gone, locked away, but he was still my brother, still the kid I'd chased fireflies with under Gran's oak tree. Clara found me outside, the courthouse steps cold under my boots, the wind whipping at my coat. I didn't look at her, just stared at the gray sky, wrestling with the ache. "Did we do the right thing?" I asked, my voice raw, barely audible over the traffic's drone. She stepped closer, her presence steady, grounding. "He chose this," she said, her tone firm but not cruel. "Every scam, every lie, he built that cell himself. We just handed him the key." I nodded, slow, her words sinking in, easing the knot in my chest. Not forgiveness, not absolution, just truth, cold and clear. She shifted, pulling something from her pocket, a bank slip, crisp and folded. "One more thing," she said, handing it over. I unfolded it, my breath catching. Another deposit, $50,000, tagged as restitution. "His dirty money," she explained, her voice dropping low. "From deals he thought I wouldn't find. It's ours now, yours, mostly. Use it to fix this mess he left you in." I stared at the numbers, a lifeline stitched from his wreckage, and felt the scales tip, relief outweighing the guilt, just enough to breathe. We walked away, her sneakers soft beside my boots, the city's hum swallowing the courthouse's echo. I thought it was over, justice served, a jagged but final cut. But as we reached the curb, a voice stopped me cold, a reporter, young and eager, shoving a mic in my face. "Hey, you're his sibling, right?" she asked, her words fast, hungry. 10 years is heavy. You gonna visit him in prison? Keep the family tie?" The question hit like a punch, sudden and sharp, and I froze, the wind biting my cheeks. Clara paused too, glancing back, her eyes unreadable but waiting. I opened my mouth, then closed it, the answer caught somewhere between my throat and my heart. Visit him? After everything, the theft, the lies, Gran's betrayal? The kid chasing fireflies felt a lifetime away, buried under a decade sentence. But he was still blood, still a piece of me I couldn't fully sever. The reporter leaned closer, her mic hovering, and the silence stretched, taut and heavy, as I stood there, hesitating, the weight of it pressing down like the gray sky above. It's been 6 months since the gavel fell, since Liam's shouts faded behind prison bars, and the world feels different now, slower, steadier, like the air after a thunderstorm clears. I'm sitting on the stoop of my apartment, the one I almost lost, watching the sun dip low over the rooftops, painting the cracked pavement in gold. The mortgage is paid off now, those relentless debt collectors silenced by the inheritance Clara clawed back, and the weight's lifted, a lightness I haven't felt since Gran was alive. I've even started something new, a little coffee shop down the block, nothing fancy, just a counter and some mismatched chairs, but it's mine. The smell of roasted beans clings to my hands as I lock up each night, a small victory stitched from the wreckage Liam left behind. Clara's still here, though she's moved out of the spare room into a tiny place of her own, close enough to drop by, far enough to keep her secrets. She's back to her quiet ways, that blue notebook tucked away somewhere I don't ask about, her voice soft again, like the storm in her has settled. But I see her differently now. Not the shy kid trailing behind me and Liam, not the shadow in Grant's kitchen, just fierce, a guardian carved from steel and silence. She doesn't talk about what she did, hacking Liam's accounts, tipping off that loan shark, handing me justice on a platter, but it's there, a thread binding us tighter than blood ever did. Today, we're headed somewhere that matters. The car hums under me as I drive, Clara in the passenger seat, her hands folded in her lap, the poetry book she's been rereading resting on her knee. The cemetery's a half-hour out, tucked between rolling hills, and the gravel crunches under the tires as I pull in. Grant's grave waits under that old oak, the one we'd climb as kids, its branches sagging now with age and memory. I grab the flowers from the back seat, lilies, white and sharp-scented, her favorite, and Clara follows, her sneakers soft against the path. The air's crisp, late spring edging into summer, and it smells of damp earth and promise. We stand there, side by side, the stone simple but hers, Eleanor Marie, beloved grandmother. I set the lilies down, their petals brushing the etched letters, and the quiet wraps around us, broken only by a breeze rustling the leaves overhead. Miss her, I say, my voice rough, not quite steady. Clara nods, her gray eyes tracing the stone. Me too, she murmurs, and for a beat, we just breathe, the weight of everything, Liam, the money, the trial, hovering between us like a ghost. I sink to one knee, the grass cool under me, and run my fingers over the stone, feeling the grooves Gran left behind. She'd hate what he did, I say, half to Clara, half to the air. All those years, trusting him, lending him cash, smiling at his lies. My chest tightens, a familiar ache, and I see her again, Gran in her apron, flour-dusted hands shaping dough, laughing at Liam's wild stories. I should have stopped him sooner. The guilt slips out, unbidden, a shadow I can't outrun. Clara crouches beside me, her shadow mingling with mine, and rests a hand on my shoulder, light, but firm. She trusted us all, she says, her voice low, steady. You couldn't have known. But I did. I watched him. Every time he took and took. I should have acted before he got this far. Her words surprised me, a crack in her armor, and I turned to her, catching the flicker of regret in her eyes. You fixed it, though, I say, meeting her gaze. More than I ever could. She doesn't smile, just nods, a silent pact sealing the space between us. We sit there a while, the sun sinking lower, casting long shadows over the graves. I think about family, how it bends, breaks, holds. Liam was the flash, the charm, the one who lit up a room. I was the steady one, patching things up. Clara was the quiet, the steel, the one who saw what we didn't. You ever think about him? I ask, breaking the silence, my voice softer now. She tilts her head, considering. Sometimes, she admits. But not like I used to. That's when I remember the letter. It came last week, slipped under my door in a plain envelope, the prison stamp stark against the white. Liam's handwriting, sloppy, rushed, spilling out a plea. I'm sorry. I know I messed up. Please, just talk to me. I can't do this alone. I'd stared at it for an hour, the paper trembling in my hands, then shoved it into a drawer, unopened. I tell Clara now, watching her face as I recount it. He wants contact. I say, my voice tight. Begging like always. She doesn't flinch, just looks at me, her expression unreadable but not cold. What do you want? She asks, turning it back on me, and I falter, the question a weight I'm not ready to lift. I stand, brushing dirt from my knees, and she rises too, the poetry book tucked under her arm. I don't know, I admit, glancing back at Grant Stone. Part of me wants to see him, yell at him, maybe forgive him. Part of me wants him to rot. The words hang there, raw and honest, and Clara steps closer, her presence a quiet anchor. He made his choices, she says, her tone firm but not harsh. You don't owe him anything, not after what he took. I nod, slow, her words settling the churn in my gut, and I feel it. The closure, not perfect, but enough. As we turn to leave, she pauses, her lips curving into a faint smile. Small, rare, but real. Family's worth protecting, she says, her voice soft but sure. Just not all of it. The line lands like a promise, a truth we've carved out together, and I feel a warmth spread through me, steady and new. I chuckle, a low sound breaking the quiet, and nudge her shoulder. You're a damn force, you know that? She doesn't answer, just keeps that smile, her eyes glinting with something fierce and fond. We walk away, side by side, the gravel crunching under my boots, her sneakers whispering beside me. The oak looms behind us, Gran's grave cradled in its shade, and the sun dips below the hills, streaking the sky with pink and gold. My coffee shop waits, debts paid, a life rebuilt. Clara's beside me, quieter now, but no less strong. Liam's letter sits in that drawer, unopened, a ghost I might face one day, or might not. For now, it's just us, two against the world, united in a way Liam never understood. Well, that's our story, mine and Clara's, laid bare for you. From betrayal to reckoning, it's been one hell of a ride, hasn't it? If it hit you where it counts, don't keep it to yourself. Share it with someone who'd get it, someone who's wrestled with family or fought for what's right. Hit that share button, drop a comment, let me know what you'd have done with Liam's letter, or if you've got a Clara in your life. And stick around, because this might not be the last you hear from us. Life's got a way of stirring up new storms, and I've got a feeling there's more to tell. Thanks for listening. See you on the other side.